every intention of making a success of my 3 months probationary period with the regiment, and of joining it fully and properly at the end of that time.
There is, unhappily, a little matter I should perhaps share with you.
Oh? What's that?
I have no intention whatever of surviving my 3 months probationary period. There is a ship which sails for England in exactly 3 months. I intend to be on her.
It's exactly how I imagined it would be.
How very uplifting for you.
But then I didn't expect you to understand.
But I do, my dear fellow. You forget. This place has haunted me since childhood.
We ought to get cleaned up and present ourselves to the adjutant.
If we can find him. Or indeed, anyone. You don't suppose there's been another mutiny, do you?
Millington, I think I'd better warn you that while I tolerated your imbecilities on our journey together, they won't be appreciated here.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon. You must be proud to sing.
And you, sir, Mr. Drake. If I may say, you look most like your father, under whom I had the honor to serve.
Thank you.
I had the honor to serve also under your father, General Millington, though I was, of course, much younger then, a mere boy.
Yes, he did have me rather late in the day.
I understand your father served with the regiment too, Proud to sing.
And my grandfather served. In my family, it is the tradition.
Quite. Proud to sing, where is everybody?
On the parade ground, sir. It is the anniversary of the Battle of Ratchapo.
Of course. Well, I should have remembered.
They should be back within the hour. I'm instructed that by that time you should be in attendance here, in uniform. The colonel will then lead in the ladies.
I hear correctly. Ladies?
Yes, sir.
Voluptuous ladies.
Oh, for God's sake, man.
Gentlemen, officers and men of the 20th Indian Light Cavalry, today we commemorate, as we do each year, the award of the Victoria Cross to Captain John Scarlett for his outstanding bravery. On this, the 3rd anniversary of his death, it is once again my duty and privilege to present the cross to Mrs. Scarlett.
Colonel, it is again my pleasure to return this medal to you for safekeeping among the other trophies which commemorate the honorable history of this regiment.
Where the devil are they, Brother Singh?
Just coming now, sir. Oh, good. Second Lieutenants Millington and Drake, may I present the Senior Subaltern, Lieutenant Fothergill.
Gentlemen, welcome. Prada Singh, could you fetch me a quick whiskey and soda? We have just a few moments to spare.
So?
What about you chaps?
Oh, my dear fellow. Just anything. I'm about to expire.
My companion is joking, of course. We're fully aware of the regimental tradition.
How good. Splendid. Well done. Thank you, Prada Singh.
So?
They're damn silly, these little tests, but one must be certain. You must be Millington.
No. Drake.
I have that dubious honor, my dear fellow.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, sit down, chaps. There's a lot to tell you. Little time to tell it in.
We are allowed to sit.
Yes, of course. Why not?
I'll pay no attention. I thought it might be another of those little tests.
Mr. Millington has a very personal sense of humor.
Oh, I see. Very funny. You're sitting in the Colonel's chair, old man.
Heavens. I shouldn't want to add sacrilege to my other crimes.
Now then, it's my job as Senior Subaltern to watch over you chaps for the next week or two. Make sure you know what's what and so on. Let me remind you of the basic facts of life. You don't speak to anyone, nor will anyone speak to you except me. It's my job to speak to you, and you may speak to me, but never to a senior officer, unless addressed first, in which case you reply, yes, sir. Unless it happens to be the Colonel, in which case you reply, yes, Colonel. We always call the Colonel, Colonel in this regiment.
Quite.
Quite.
Eminently sound arrangement, if I may say so.
Good. Now, when the Colonel arrives, we shall withdraw to a corner. Over there. At an appropriate time, I shall strike the gong, announce strangers in the mess, and introduce each of you individually. No one will pay the least attention except the Colonel, who will say, thank you, Mr. Fothergill. You will say nothing. We shall then wait for the adjutant to join us, when you will present yourselves, and we shall withdraw to your quarters.
Hooray! Section right! Quick march!
And now, as to the ladies. There will be in the Colonel's party this afternoon, I think, only Ma'am Strang herself, the Colonel's lady. And, Mrs. Scarlett. Yes. Yes, I think I should perhaps say a word or two about Mrs. Scarlett. She is a lady very much admired in the mess, very popular. Her husband was awarded the Victoria Cross. Posthumously. She's a regular feature of our lives here. However, she is not above offering certain favors. Now, don't misunderstand me. She is very much a lady, but...
Yes, of course. Most distressing.
Yes. My point is that junior officers are well advised to remain unsusceptible. She is a very attractive woman. However, certain senior officers having, you understand me, made a point with Mrs. Scarlett.
Oh, I see.
Of course, this is a matter of which, while you should be fully appraised, you know nothing.
No, quite.
Just remain courteous, but,
Distant?
distant. Yes.
What on earth is this filthy old tunic doing in the mess?
Mr. Millington! That was Captain Scarlett's tunic. He was wearing it when he was cut down.
It's been a very messy affair.
Warfare is not noted for its comfort. Nor is the future of young officers who fail to acquaint themselves with the history and traditions of this regiment.
Still, when you come to think of it, it must smell absolutely frightful.
How's young Truly getting along, Doctor?
Not too badly, thank you, Colonel.
Damned idiot.
We'll be up and about in a day or two. Be playing polo again soon, I think.
Colonel, there are strangers in the mess. May I present Mr. Millington and Mr. Drake? Colonel!
Thank you, Mr. Fothergill.
Surely that can't be General Millington's boy. He looks far too young.
With respect, ma'am. hardly believe you could have known my father. You also look far too young. Well, Mr. Fothergill.
I'm sorry, sir. Sorry. I did not hear that, Mr. Fothergill. I must have failed to make my instructions plain, Captain Harper.
Mr. Fothergill, you are assumed to be capable of the duties of your office. That is why you hold it. I am waiting, Mr. Fothergill.
Present yourself, man. I have the honor to present myself, sir. Mr. Drake, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. I also have the honor to present myself, sir. Do you lack a name, sir?
Millington.
Sir. Ah. Come here, Mr. Millington. Sir? Mr. Millington. If I ever hear from you again, it will be for the last time. Do you understand me?
May I be allowed to say...
You may be allowed to say nothing. You may be silent. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Return to your place. Mr. Fothergill, if you find that your duties are too arduous for you, I'm sure we can find a way to have you relieved of them. Understood?
So... You bloody fool. What the hell were you playing at?
My dear fellow, I'm
Quiet!
sorry.
I told you to remain silent while there were senior officers in the mess.
I certainly didn't mean to get...
Shut up! I don't know what your game is, Millington. But let me tell you this. If you put up one more black against me, I'll make sure you're kicked out of this regiment before you even finish probation. You hear me?
Yes, Fothergill.
Mr. Fothergill!
Mr. Fothergill!
I'll get your quarters. Move!
Not with Millington, Major.
Can't we get rid of him, sir?
Well, it's not easy. Son of a general, distinguished colonel of the regiment. Well done, lad. PC and all that, you know, very difficult.
I quite understand, sir.
Seems to drink rather a lot at dinner, doesn't he?
Yes, sir. But strictly speaking, there's no ruling against that, sir. As long as he can hold it.
Well, if he does overdo it, I'd wheel him out of the mess as quickly and quietly as you can,
Right, sir.
Well run! For a first run, the boy seems to be doing remarkably well. What do you say, Lionel? I agree.
Remember Toby's first run, Lionel?
Regimental history, Colonel. Just 3 years ago, wasn't it?
This was his first posting. And his last. Yes, that was the end of it for him. And for me, in a way.
You only had the one boy, didn't you?
Yes, still one except. But one plans, you know. Toby was to carry on the line, the tradition. It's still something I can't...
Point.
run, sir. Damn fine run, sir.
Well run, sir. Go on, I need a drink.
By special request of Mrs. Foster, we have a ladies' excuse me walk.
That's there. Colonel. Well, that's your story about the couple in the bathing machine, Marjorie. They're too young to hear it.
Nonsense. A little vulgarity never did anyone any harm.
Well, it is a damn funny yarn, sir.
Oh, you're an outrageous woman. Come and dance with me. And stop corrupting my junior officer.
I'm open to corruption at any time, Mrs. Scarlett.
Shame.
Anything to report, Mr. Hart?
No, sir.
All right, let's visit the guard room.
Yes, sir. Why, Mrs. Scarlett.
You really shouldn't drink so much, Mr. Millington.
No, ma'am. No, I shouldn't.
You're acquiring quite a reputation for it.
Does that concern you?
Personally, not at all.
Pity. I think I could enjoy being rescued from degradation by you.
Don't be tiresome, Mr. Millington. Why aren't you dancing? There are so many young ladies here tonight who would be glad of your company. Pretty girls, some of them.
It's pleasing to hear beauty pay tribute to mere prettiness.
Mr. Millington, you have already paid me one compliment too many in public.
Well, that's why I'm taking care tonight to pay my compliments in private.
You will pay me no more compliments at
No.
all.
Don't go. Please. Did you know that when two swans mate, they mate for life?
Really?
So I've read.
How touching.
I must say I find it rather sad.
Why?
Imagine if one were to die before the other.
Is that why you drink, then? For the lost swan?
No, ma'am.
Why, then?
Concern yourself about it, please.
How old are you?
Does it matter?
You have all life.
All life before me, as they say.
You come to us laden with advantages, do you not?
To you, it seems I come with none. Am I quite out of favor?
Good night, Mr. Millington.
Please.
You'll do yourself no good with this. Alistair? What are you doing here?
Admiring the stars. And you.
You are impertinent, Mr. Millington. Go away. You will please go away.
And if I don't, please?
For heaven's sake, be sensible. You seem to think yourself quite a ladies' man, Mr. Millington.
My reputation travels before me. I should like to think we had something in common, Mrs. Scarlett.
It is a great mistake to be deceived by reputation.
I was looking for the company of a woman. And my impression of you, ma'am, is that you are a woman.
You are behaving stupidly towards me. I shall call out.
You tempt me. You tempt me indeed.
May I fetch anything for you, Colonel?
No part thing. I'm in need of a new pair of legs.
I shall endeavor to see that you are not disturbed, Colonel.
Thank you.
Colonel, dear, I thought you were feeling a little tired.
Oh,
no,
ma'am.
no, don't get up.
If you would forgive me, my dear.
I'd forgive you anything.
What's the time?
Nearly 2.
Oh, we should be able to leave soon. I feel we've said good night to most of our guests.
Yes, got the usual late stayers. Marjorie, of course, and Hopwood. Oh, and that colonel in the Lancers.
Forster. Peregrine Forster.
And his wife.
His wife, yes.
It's been a lovely ball.
Has it, ma'am?
Yes.
It's something one feels one owes to the past.
I know. Colonel, dear, would you do something for me?
What?
All evening, I've danced with bounding young men and doddering old bores. I should so much like to dance with my own dear husband.
Oh, dear, must I?
It's an order.
Very well.
Help me! It's Marjorie. My dear, what happened?
Gotta take the brandy. Jake, fetch the doctor quickly. March. What'll happen? Let's get her into the mess. What's happening here? She's been attacked. Come with me.
It's all right, Marge. It's all right.
Give me the brandy, please.
Let me through, please, gentlemen. What on earth has happened, ma'am?
She's been attacked, Doctor.
Let me see her, dear. Is that true? You were attacked?
Yes.
Well, who by? Who was it? Marjorie. Someone attacked you. You must tell us who it was.
It was him.
God, you! Let's Alistair! Major Roach, this officer is under arrest.
Colonel. Captain Harper. Detail 2 officers as close escort.
Sir. Mr. Hart? Mr. Fothergill? Hush this matter up to protect the honor of the regiment would be shameful. It must be by general court-martial. It must be by due process of military law.
The due process of military law can be followed by less public means.
I know the process you're referring to. It's secret and convenient, and justice of a kind can, I suppose, come out of it. But it's not justice that I can possibly approve.
Colonel, there are only two alternatives. A public trial with its public consequences, or a private trial.
With its private consequences.
On your feet. Morning, gentlemen.
Morning, sir.
Be seated, please. Gentlemen, last night there occurred an incident which, if it were dealt with, shall we say, carelessly, could profoundly affect the honor of this regiment. Fortunately, however, a procedure exists which makes it possible for the entire affair to be kept strictly within the confines of regimental jurisdiction. That is why you're here. When Mrs. Scarlett has recovered, you are to be tried, Mr. Millington, by subaltern's court-martial. I shall now explain to you what that means. The subaltern's court consists of 5 officers, a president, in this case myself, and 4 others, also a prosecuting officer and a defending officer. You will understand, gentlemen, that a subaltern's court-martial has no official existence. It is outside the normal structure of discipline and command. Should the senior officer become officially aware of it, he would be obliged to end it. Make no mistake, the powers of this court are summary and absolute. There is no appeal to higher authority. Do I make myself clear?
Yes, sir.
Now, Mr. Witnesses, in addition to civilian personnel, officers of any rank may be called to appear as and when they are required. But should a senior officer be called, his appearance in court will in no way affect his official knowledge of the proceedings, which of course do not exist. Is that understood? I don't think you'll find this amusing for long, Mr. Millington.
No, sir.
Stand up, Mr. Millington. It is my duty as president of this court to decide on its composition. Before I do so, you are entitled to select your defending officer from among those present.
Oh, very nice. You mean now?
Now.
I don't suppose I could choose the colonel, could I? No, perhaps not. Well, in that case, I choose Mr. Drake. He's a gentleman of honor.
Very well. Mr. Drake will defend. The prosecuting officer will be Mr. Fothergill.
Who else?
The other members of the court, in addition to myself as president, will be Mr. Hart, Mr. Bolton, Mr. Winters, Mr. Trulli. Mr. Hutton will act as usher.
So?
Are there any questions? Mr. Drake.
Sir, am I obliged to accept this duty?
Mr. Millington has chosen you, Mr. Drake.
Yes, sir.
Very well. You will now return your duty, gentlemen. Mr. Drake, you will remain here. Mr. Millington, you will wait outside under escort, Mr. Hutton.
Sir.
And you will be confined to quarters until the trial begins. Carry on. I appreciate that you have been under something of a disadvantage since you arrived here, Mr. Drake, and that fate is determined to keep you linked with Mr. Millington to your discredit.
It's just that I'm anxious to do well here, sir.
Of course. Nonetheless, it is necessary that Mr. Millington be defended. But I hardly think you need to embarrass yourself unduly. It's very much an open and shut case, is it not?
But it's still my duty to defend Mr. Millington as well as I'm able to.
Naturally, you will find whatever you can to say in his favor.
I mean, it's a matter of honor, is it not, sir? The honor of the regiment demands that Mr. Millington be properly defended.
It is necessary to go through the motions, Mr. Drake. You're not a fool. You know what is required of you.
To be fair, sir.
Just so. To be fair. To the regiment. Good. Excellent. Carry on, Mr. Drake.
President, the charge before this court reads as follows. That on the 17th instant, the accused officer, Second Lieutenant Millington E., did attack, wound, and assault Mrs. Marjorie Scarlett, widow of the late Captain John Reginald Scarlett, V.C., of this regiment. That by this action, he has betrayed the trust reposed in him by his colonel, brought the name of this regiment into dishonor, and conducted himself in a manner unbecoming an officer and a gentleman. The charge ends, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. How do you plead, Mr. Millington? Guilty or not guilty?
Indifferent.
The accused officer pleads not guilty, sir, Mr. President.
Not guilty, Mr. Drake?
Yes, Mr. President.
I see. Very well. Mr. Fothergill?
I call my first witness, the regimental doctor.
Mr. Hutton?
Sir. Doctor, if you please, sir.
Be seated, Doctor, please. Thank you. I'm obliged to remind you, sir, that you're on your honor to speak the truth. Of course. Mr. Fothergill?
Doctor, on the night of the 17th, Mrs. Scarlett claimed she had been attacked. You attended her. In your opinion, was her claim justified?
Most certainly. It was a gross, cowardly assault.
And did she suggest who might have been responsible?
She made a direct accusation.
Against whom, sir?
Against that officer.
And were Mrs. Scarlett's injuries such as to sustain this accusation?
Well, injuries are not in themselves evidence as to the identity of an attacker. However, Mrs. Scarlett has repeated the accusation. I asked her again myself because I wanted to be certain in my own mind she would affirm it. And no longer in a state of hysteria.
I believe you examined Mr. Millington and that you found a gash behind his right ear.
I did, yes.
Did he tell you how he sustained this injury?
He said that Mrs. Scarlett had struck him.
Struck him when, sir?
I gather during the course of a struggle.
Are you saying then that Mr. Millington admitted to you that he attacked Mrs. Scarlett?
So far as I know, he has freely admitted that to anyone who has asked him.
Thank you, Doctor.
Mr. Drake?
Mr. President, gentlemen of the court. Doctor, the injuries sustained by Mrs. Scarlett, what exactly did they amount to?
Well, her wrists and arms were bruised. The palms of her hands were skinned, and her legs down there. Her knees were bruised. She had cuts about the body, and her dress was torn.
Could these injuries have been sustained in running through the shrubs and bushes that surround the folly?
Yes, I think they could have been.
Doctor, had Mrs. Scarlett been, in any other sense, interfered with?
You mean sexually?
Mr. Drake, Mr. Millington is not charged with rape, but with assault.
Yes, but...
Very well. The court does not require an answer to that question, Doctor.
it be fair to say then, Doctor, that this attack was, relatively speaking, a failure?
But it wasn't a failure, Mr. Drake. You saw for yourself. Apart from her physical injuries, Mrs. Scarlett was in a state of terror bordering on acute hysteria.
Quite so. Precisely.
Yes, sir, but, well, I'm not clear. I'm not clear exactly why Mrs. Scarlett was so afraid.
Are you serious, Mr. Drake?
I mean, Mr. Millington was quite drunk at the time.
Mr. Drake, this court will not find drunkenness as mitigation of any act on the part of Mr. Millington.
But surely, sir, it must reduce his responsibility.
No. The responsibility for drinking to excess remains his alone.
I'd drop it if I were you. The cards are stacked against you.
Mr. Millington, you will be silent. Mr. Drake, have you any further questions for this witness? Well, Mr. Drake?
Yes, I have. Doctor, would you not expect that a woman of Mrs. Scarlett's experience would be easily able to deal with...
Mr. Drake, we're not here to discuss Mrs. Scarlett, but to judge Mr. Millington.
But surely, Mr. President, it's relevant.
No, Mr. Drake, it is not relevant.
But on the very day we arrived here, Mr. Fothergill warned us quite specifically that Mrs. Scarlett was inclined to allow certain officers to...
Mr. Drake, it is of no concern to this court what the senior subaltern may or may not have said to you on some private occasion. So far as this court is concerned, Mrs. Scarlett is a woman of the highest character and reputation. Do you understand me?
But, sir, Mr. President, well, how am I to defend this officer if you will allow me no latitude in this matter of...
You are entitled to whatever latitude I, as president of this court, choose to give you, and no more.
Drake, for God's sake, sit down. You're embarrassing us all.
Mr. Millington?
He has no idea what is required of him, Mr. President. You should have made your instructions plainer.
That is enough.
You're expected to go through the motions, that's all. Not to indulge in a talent for legalistic moralizing. The bourgeois creature you are, to be sure.
Well, Mr. Drake?
I have no more questions for this witness.
Thank you, Doctor.
Mr. President, gentlemen.
Fothergill? The next logical step would be to call Mrs. Scarlett, sir. But I would hope the defending officer would accept a written deposition from her.
I quite agree. Mr. Drake?
Well, I'm not sure, sir. Well, I must have time to think.
Very well. The court will reconvene at midnight tomorrow. Thank you, gentlemen. You will leave the mess quickly and quietly. Mr. Millington, you will go with your escort. Mr. Drake, you will remain here. Dismissed. Drake, what the devil do you think you're playing at?
I was just trying to do my duty, sir. To ensure Mr. Millington had a fair trial.
Do you mean to suggest that he will not receive a fair trial?
But surely, sir, he's entitled to face his accuser.
There is some doubt in your mind as to his guilt?
No, sir. None whatever.
Very well. Tomorrow you will plead Mr. Millington guilty, as clearly he wishes you to. As for yourself, we shall see how you conduct yourself in the weeks to come. You've made an excellent beginning here, Mr. Drake. I should not like to think we had been mistaken in you, too.
No, sir.
Here is Mrs. Scarlett's deposition. You will be requiring it since you will not be calling her. That is all, Mr. Drake.
Captain Harper.
Well?
Sir, I must repeat. Isn't Mr. Millington entitled to face his accuser?
Are you being willfully obstructive? Do you appreciate to what extent we are already indebted to Mrs. Scarlett? Do you realize
That had she made an official charge against him, Mr. Millington would now be facing public court-martial by officers not of this regiment. That he would be publicly disgraced. And so should we.
But, sir, is his disgrace not inevitable in any event?
Why, Mr. Drake?
Well, if he is found guilty, you will surely be obliged to get rid of him.
I do not think so. Mr. Millington will find that we have duties for him yet. Of an unpleasant nature, to be sure, but admirably suited to his character.
You mean to keep him here?
For a year or two. 5, perhaps. Or even 10 or more. The option lies with us. We must see how long it takes, Mr. Millington, to learn a simple lesson. That this regiment is not to be mocked.
I see.
You can do nothing for Mr. Millington and only harm to yourself. Do you understand?
Sir, I request to be relieved of this duty.
No, Mr. Drake. You have an admirable opportunity of serving this regiment. I shall follow your progress with the keenest interest. Good night.
Ask about Mrs. Bandanai, Sahab. Ask about the bleeding.
Who?
Mrs. Bandanai, Sahab.
Hey!
Ask about...
तुम यहाँ क्या कर रहे हो? चली जाओ यहाँ से. No, wait. Be off with you. चली जाओ यहाँ से, जाओ. I'm sorry, sir. It will not happen again.
Well, who was that?
The servant of Ma'am Scarlett, sir.
Mrs. Scarlett?
Yes, sir. I shall take the strongest possible action.
No. Father Singh, who is Mrs. Bandanai?
She is the widow of Jamadar Bandanai. He was a hero of this regiment. He died with Captain Scarlett.
Could you arrange for me to speak with her?
It is not usual, sir.
It might be of assistance to Mr. Millington. You know that he's in trouble. His trial continues tomorrow night. Well, you greatly admired his father.
I'll see what I can do, sir.
Thank you, Brother Singh.
Ah, my knight in shining armor. I have news for you, my learned friend. The battle is over. I'm changing my plea to guilty. Well?
You're very confident, aren't you?
Why shouldn't I be?
You won't... You won't get out of here, you know.
No?
Oh, in a year or two. Or perhaps 5. Or even 10 or more. Until then, we're to be graced with your presence.
What are you talking about?
I'm quoting the adjutant. My dear fellow. We intend to keep you here, Millington.
I don't believe you.
They have duties for you of an unpleasant nature. You ought to be taught a lesson. You ought to learn that this regiment is not to be mocked.
My God, I never thought of that.
Nor did I.
Come in now, please.
Court is now in session. Mr. Fothergill.
Mr. President, as you already know, this afternoon, Mr. Drake informed me that he would not accept the written deposition I had obtained from Mrs. Scarlett, but insisted that she should appear before this court. I therefore propose to call her now.
Very well.
With your permission, sir, I would prefer that Mrs. Scarlett be called later.
No, Mr. Drake. You wish to question Mrs. Scarlett? Very well, you shall. Now.
With respect, Mr. President, if you will permit me to call another witness first.
Certainly not, Mr. Drake.
Again, with respect, sir, I am entitled, as laid down by you before the members of this court, to call any witness as and when required.
Very well. Whom do you wish to call?
The second in command, sir.
Is Major Roach aware of this?
He's waiting in the lobby, sir.
Mr. Hutton?
Sir.
Craig, what are you up to?
If you please, sir.
Sir. Please be seated. Mr. Drake?
You sent for me this evening, sir. You felt I should know that you had witnessed the attack on Mrs. Scarlett by Mr. Millington.
I did, yes.
What were the circumstances?
Well, I'd been on duty with Mr. Hart, inspecting the guardroom. And I was on my way, alone, through the gardens to inspect the perimeter patrol. I was nearing the folly when I heard voices coming from it, a man and a woman. The man seemed to be, well, he seemed to be pleading. And then I recognized Mrs. Scarlett's voice. It was sharp and clear. She said, Mr. Millington, I've told you already, but your advances are offensive and pointless, or words to that effect.
Did she sound angry, sir?
Yes, she did indeed, extremely angry.
And frightened?
No, I would have said she was fully in command of the situation, not frightened, but angry.
And what happened then, sir?
Well, Mrs. Scarlett came from the folly, followed by Mr. Millington.
You saw them clearly, sir?
Yes, in a patch of light reflected from the mess. There were more lights than usual outside that night.
Yes, sir. And then?
Well, he took her arm and she threw him off. Ordered him to leave her alone and walked angrily towards the mess.
She walked, sir?
Yes.
She didn't run?
No, she walked.
Was she distressed?
Mr. Drake, I've told you, she was angry.
Yes, sir. And Mr. Millington?
Well, I don't really know. I lost sight of both of them in the shadows. I thought he just made off, but you say he claimed she laid him out. Well, it's possible, of course, but I didn't see it.
Quite so, sir. And then?
Well, you know the rest. There was great consternation, everybody running, myself included. When I got to the mess and saw Mrs. Scarlett's condition.
Yes?
I was greatly surprised. Mrs. Scarlett was in a terrible state, much worse than I would have imagined.
Why do you say that, sir?
Well, there's no excuse for Mr. Millington's behavior, none at all. But I saw nothing violent or extreme. Otherwise, I'd have put an end to it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Major Roach. We're most obliged to you for coming here tonight.
Well, it was my duty. Though I'm bound to say, I consider the regiment ill-served by unauthorized charades of this nature. Good night, gentlemen.
Well, Mr. Drake, it seems to me that your defense witness, Major Roach, has given us a detailed account of precisely the offense with which Mr. Millington is charged. Perhaps I should remind you that you're here to defend this officer, not to prosecute him.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the nature of this trial, it's well to be reminded why we are here.
Quite. Are you now willing for Mrs. Scarlett to be called?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hutton?
Sir. If you please, ma'am.
Ma'am. You will appreciate, Ma'am, that this disturbance to yourself is none of our choosing.
I'm not at all disturbed. Thank you.
Ma'am. Mr. Fothergill?
I should like to ask you just 3 questions, ma'am. Were you attacked on the night of the 17th?
I was, yes.
By whom, ma'am?
By Mr. Millington.
You have no doubt about that?
None whatever.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Drake?
The folly where the attack took place, it's a very isolated spot. I was wondering, Ma'am, how you happened to be there.
There are moments, Mr. Drake, even on the most enjoyable occasions, when one wishes to be alone.
Just so, Ma'am. And, it was here that Mr. Millington disturbed you.
It was, yes.
Did you try to get away at once?
No, at first I didn't realize how determined he was.
Forgive me, Ma'am, but you're an extremely attractive woman, no longer married. You must have had to deal with silly young gentlemen before this.
Not young men who are viciously drunk, Mr. Drake.
Viciously drunk, ma'am?
Mr. Millington made it plain that he intended to use me as a means of getting himself dismissed from this regiment.
I see. So, you were forced to hit him?
I was, yes.
What with?
With my fists, my arms, whatever came to hand.
And did anything come to hand?
I don't understand you.
Well, did you pick up a stone, perhaps?
No, I don't think so.
Or a branch from a tree?
No.
If you please, Ma'am, I think Mr. Drake is referring to...
I am referring to the injury sustained by Mr. Millington. A deep gash some 2 inches long behind his right ear.
Yes. Yes, of course. I do remember now. It was a stone. I picked up a stone.
I don't think so, Ma'am. I searched the area around the folly for an hour this evening, and there was not a stone to be found for 100 yards in any direction.
It may have been wood, a branch.
No, ma'am. Not a stick, nor a stone, anywhere. Nothing with which you could possibly have struck Mr. Millington.
Really, this is quite absurd, Mr. President.
It is indeed, Ma'am. Mr. Drake, it's perfectly obvious that when Mrs. Scarlett broke away from Mr. Millington, he fell against a tree or a wall.
No, I didn't.
Silence, sir.
I was hit.
Be quiet, please.
Of course, if you wish to take his word against mine.
Certainly not, Ma'am. Mr. Drake, this has gone far enough.
I'm sorry, sir. I was mistaken. Misunderstanding, ma'am. I see now what must have happened. You broke away from Mr. Millington, and he fell back against this wall or tree, and then you ran screaming towards the mess.
Yes.
Ran as fast as you could.
Naturally.
Or did you walk? In his evidence, Major Roach said that you walked.
Major Roach?
Yes, Ma'am. Major Roach appeared in court a few moments ago. It seems he witnessed the attack upon you.
Oh, I see.
In his testimony, Major Roach said that you walked away from Mr. Millington, ma'am.
Yes, well then, perhaps I did walk.
Walked or ran? What does it matter, Mr. Drake? Really, you're splitting hairs.
Yes, Mr. President. Well, let's say then that at first you walked and then you ran. Well, perhaps you were afraid that Mr. Millington would attack you again.
I was, yes.
As he had attacked you so violently in the first place.
Yes.
What exactly did he do to you, Ma?
Well...
He took you by the arm?
Yes.
And, drew you towards him?
Yes.
And then? Well, did he try to put his hand on your bosom?
Mr. Drake.
Your dress was torn.
He may have done.
Did he or didn't
he? I can't remember.
But you must remember. This was a terrifying experience for you, Mrs. Scarlett. You ran screaming all the way back to the mess.
What are you implying?
That is all, Mr. Drake.
I have one more question for this witness.
Sit down, Mr. Drake.
No, sir. Mrs. Scarlett, why are you lying?
How dare you? How dare you?
Mum, if you will allow me.
I'll tolerate no more of this, Captain Harper. In future, you can play your childish games without me.
This court will reconvene tomorrow night at midnight, when this entire matter will be concluded. Court is adjourned. Good night, gentlemen. You have finished yourself here, Mr. Drake. You hear me? You're finished.
If what I've heard in this court is typical of the honor of this regiment, then I would not wish to remain. And I thought this was a regiment of honor.
So it is, my dear fellow. A regiment of the highest honor, as you yourself have made plain to me. What's going on, Arthur? Why should she lie?
I don't know.
Look here, Arthur. If you wish to remain here, you really will have to abandon this enterprise. It isn't too late, you know.
I fancy I can survive without sympathy, Millington. Yours, least of all.
You disappoint me. Well, is it just pride, then? Wounded pride?
Call it principle. Why not? Bourgeois principle. But that, of course, is something you wouldn't understand.
That's true.
Your pardon, Drake, sir. I saw you come here. I waited for you.
Why?
You asked to speak with Mrs. Bandhanai. She's here.
Please, won't you come and sit down? There is a young officer in trouble. I want to help him, but without you, I can't.
Ask her if she was attacked, sir.
Were you attacked? As Mrs. Scarlett was attacked?
It is true, sir.
When?
6 months ago.
6 months. Who attacked you?
She will not tell you, sir.
Well, what happened then?
I was with an officer. I had been with him, lain with him. He had left the bungalow. I was alone. Then came another man. A man in scarlet and gold. He had a sword. He threatened me. He forced me to crawl around on my hands and knees. I had to make noises like a pig. A pig!
It is the game. It is the game as they play it in the mess. Sticking the pig with the sword from behind as it runs.
It's not possible.
It is the game, sir. I'm certain.
Who could do such a thing? Ask her, Prada Singh. Who was it?
वो कौन था उसका नाम बताओ.
मैं उसका नाम नहीं बता सकती. मुझे यहाँ से पेंशन मिलती है. मैं किसी पर इल्जाम नहीं लगा सकती.
She cannot tell you, sir. She dare not. She has a pension from the regiment.
मैं नहीं बता सकती. मैं नहीं बता सकती.
Please, Mrs. Bannon, please, I beg you, tell me.
Scarlett. Captain Scarlett. मैं सच बोलती हूँ.
What did she say?
That the man was Captain Scarlett.
But that can't be. He's dead. He was killed.
Yes, sir.
Well, then, what did she mean, Prada Singh?
She meant what she said, sir. That the man you looked for is Captain Scarlett.
That ought to give you something to think about.
Thank you. If you want to speak to me, Mr. Drake, you're at liberty to do so.
Thank you, sir. It's just that I was looking at Captain Scarlett's uniform.
Yes?
Well, I know most of the story of the 75 revolt, but I'd be most interested to learn about the end of it, sir. At first hand.
Why, Mr. Drake? Sit down, sit down. Slow down, bud. Under the circumstances, I won't ask you that.
Thank you, sir. You found Captain Scarlett's body?
And Toby Strang.
The Colonel's son?
Yes. It was not a particularly agreeable sight. The tribesmen in that area are noted for their barbarism.
But Captain Scarlett was recognizable, sir.
Well, there was a uniform, a captain in this regiment. It could have been no one else.
You saw that it was him?
Yes, I saw him.
But perhaps the mutilation was such that you couldn't actually swear that it was Captain Scarlett.
No. But as I say, it could have been no one else.
No, I suppose not. And the Colonel's son?
He died 2 weeks later.
2 terrible for the Colonel.
Yes, he took it hard. He blamed himself for allowing Toby to go on that particular patrol.
Well, I must leave you to your game.
Will tonight see the end of it, do you think?
I hope so.
Arthur? I've been thinking.
So have I. I now know that you're not guilty.
What?
Oh, you may have been stupid, but you're not vicious.
No.
Now, look, I want you to trust me. Tonight's proceedings may not be pleasant, but whatever happens, you must remain silent.
This trial. You're destroying yourself here for no reason.
You needn't concern yourself with me.
I do. I know what this place means to you.
You're mistaken. I don't expect to remain here, nor do I want to.
Court is now in session. Mr. Fothergill.
I have written depositions, Mr. President, from the Colonel, Major Wimborne, Colonel Foster of the Lancers, and Mrs. Foster. If Mr. Drake will accept them, the case for the prosecution can be closed.
Mr. Drake?
I accept them.
Thank you. Mr. Drake, do you still wish to recall the doctor and Mrs. Scarlett?
I do, sir.
Very well. Tubman.
Sir. If you please, sir.
I'm sorry we've had to recall you, Doctor.
So am I, but never mind.
Mr. Drake?
Doctor, 2 nights ago, I questioned you concerning Mrs. Scarlett's injuries.
You did, yes.
Why did you not tell us she had been attacked with a sword?
What?
What are you saying, Mr. Drake?
Mr. President, I'm prepared to back every statement I make tonight, however unpleasant, with factual evidence.
But I hadn't got a sword. Mr. Millington. Continue, Mr. Drake.
Thank you, sir. Doctor, I believe that 6 months ago, you had occasion to examine the widow of Jemada Bandanai.
That's so, yes.
She also had been attacked.
Yes.
With a sword.
But what has this to do with...
She had been attacked with a sword, yes or no, Doctor?
It's possible, but...
Doctor, the game played on mess nights.
Yes?
With the stuffed boar on wheels.
Now, just a minute.
What is the object of this game? Is it not to pierce the animal with the point of a sword?
Yes, it is, but...
What part of the animal?
I don't think it matters.
That part which is naturally presented in flight, the hindquarters, is that it, Doctor?
I suppose so, yes.
Doctor, where did this game originate? In the field?
Presumably, yes. Pig sticking is a well-known sport, so...
And is it the object in the field to pierce the anus of a living animal with steel?
Of course not. What a revolting suggestion.
Oh, I see. That's just the regimental variation.
That is enough, Mr. Drake.
No, sir. It is not enough. Doctor, in what part of her body was Mrs. Bandanai injured?
This is abominable. Are you suggesting that whoever it was...
I am suggesting what, in fact, I know to be true. That 6 months ago, somebody played the regimental game with Mrs. Bandanai in the role of pig.
That's a most horrible idea.
Oh, yes, it is. But were not her injuries consistent with such an attack?
The court requires an answer to that question, Doctor.
Her injuries were consistent, yes.
On the night that Mrs. Scarlett was attacked, I believe that you examined her, Doctor.
I did, yes, but there can be no connection between the two cases.
None, Doctor? This is the dress worn by Mrs. Scarlett that night. I got it from her servant who'd been told to burn it, but fortunately, she thought it to be too valuable and kept it. Doctor, these bloodstains, do they coincide with Mrs. Scarlett's injuries?
Approximately, yes.
On the buttocks?
Well, on the thigh.
Well, high up on the thigh.
On the thigh, Mr. Drake.
Here, Doctor. How would you describe that?
It looks like a tear.
Or a cut? The cut made by the point of a sword?
Let me see that dress, Mr. Drake. I believe Mr. Drake is right, Doctor. That's a cut, not a tear. It could well have been made by a sword.
Thank you, sir. In which case, Doctor, do not Mrs. Van Eyes and Mrs. Scarlett's injuries suggest that they were both attacked in the same manner by the same man?
Yes, I suppose that does seem possible.
Yet, Mrs. Van was attacked 6 months ago.
Yes.
At which time Mr. Millington was in England. You agree, Doctor?
Yes, I believe so, yes.
So if both attacks were made by the same man, that man could not have been Mr. Millington.
I suppose not, but Mrs. Scarlett...
Mrs. Scarlett accused Mr. Millington. Yes, Doctor. And having examined her, you still accepted her statement without question?
Of course I did.
Yes.
What is your theory, Mr. Drake, if you have one?
My belief, sir, is that Mrs. Scarlett was attacked twice. First by Mr. Millington, if a rather pathetic scuffle can be called an attack, and secondly, by another man, with a sword, having first used the hilt of it to knock Mr. Millington unconscious.
And who was this man?
When Mrs. Bandonai was attacked, she was taken to hospital?
Yes.
By whom? An officer of this regiment.
You must answer, Doctor.
No. Captain Harper, you are allowing this inquiry to go far beyond its permitted limitations. I refuse to answer any more questions.
I'm afraid, Mr. Drake, that the doctor is right. I know your intentions are honorable, nonetheless.
Mr. President, before you take any action to stop these proceedings, I beg you to allow me to call my remaining witness, because then I believe I can bring this matter to an end.
Captain Harper.
Colonel.
And you, Mr. Drake, come with me.
This court is now adjourned. That way, gentlemen.
Mr. Drake, this regiment has a history stretching far back in the past, a history of honor and integrity. Yet the doctor tells me you just made an allegation, foul in its implications, which is a gross insult to this regiment and to every officer in it.
I have said nothing, Colonel, that I cannot prove to be true.
You cannot prove an impossibility. No officer in this regiment is capable of what you suggest.
With your permission, Colonel.
And?
I cannot, in honor, say other than I believe Mr. Drake to be right in this affair. I'm convinced that Mrs. Scarlett was attacked with a sword, as Mrs. Bandonai had been attacked.
Mrs. Bandonai?
You didn't know about Mrs. Bandonai?
Mr. Drake.
But, Colonel, if you've already been lied to once...
I have not been lied to. We do not lie to one another in this mess. Gentlemen do not question the honor of other gentlemen. You are suggesting that I allow this trial to continue? You are prepared to stake your honor and your future with the regiment on this?
I have no other means of retrieving myself, sir.
And you, Captain Harper, are you willing to stake 12 years' service on this gamble?
Yes, Colonel, I am.
Very well. But I wish to be present tomorrow night. If you fail, you will not expect either of you to remain with this regiment. Good night.
We have hurt a man whom I greatly admire. I trust you are aware I knew nothing of this.
Yes, sir, I am. Thank you for supporting me.
It is necessary, at whatever cost, to support the honor of the regiment. Good night, Mr. Drake.
I've been called again.
What do you intend to do?
I'm afraid.
My dear girl, no one knows anything. No one's going to know anything. Just keep silent.
But if things go wrong,
You know very well. They'll take India away from you.
where could I go? England? There's no one. Nothing in England for me now.
Mrs. Scarlett, in recalling you tonight, I have only one purpose in mind, to reach the truth. Do you believe that?
Yes.
Thank you, Mom. You recognize this, of course. On an examination of this dress, the court has accepted that you were attacked as Mrs. Bandenay was attacked with a sword. And not by Mr. Millington. He had no sword. That is true, is it not?
Yes, it's true.
I must ask you, Ma'am, if indeed Mr. Millington attacked you in any serious sense at all.
No, not at all, Mr. Drake. He has not the violence in him.
He did not assault or...
He begged me to cry out. He begged me to accuse him. He could not bring himself to harm me.
Then you withdraw the charge against him?
I do.
And make no complaint of any kind?
Only of inherent gentleness.
And gentleness is not a crime.
You think not, Mr. Drake, then you are in the wrong place. He is one of the few gentle men I have ever met in this regiment.
I must ask you now, ma'am, to give the court a true account of the attack upon you.
He came out of the darkness. Suddenly. I tried to get away, but I fell. He soared. He laughed as he cut me. I was crawling, trying to get away. He ran around me, cut me again. And all the time, he was saying, over and over, he was saying...
He was saying what?
Pig! 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 Pig!
Who was it, ma'am? Who was it? Is that why you accused Mr. Millington? Because you recognized your attacker and knew you could never accuse him? Mrs. Scarlett, was it not your husband? That's the truth of it, isn't it? That the man who attacked you was your husband, Captain Scarlett.
My husband is dead.
Can you prove that?
No, I can't prove it. No one can.
Then how can you be sure it was not he that attacked you?
Oh, don't be stupid, Mr. Drake. For the same reason that I knew it wasn't Mr. Millington. Because I saw who it was.
And once again, ma'am, I must ask you, who was it?
I can't tell you that.
Mrs. Scarlett, who are you protecting?
I have nothing more to say.
Madam, I must insist that you answer Mr. Drake.
And I refuse to answer him. Don't you understand, Mr. Drake? It doesn't matter who it was, which man it was. They are all the same. Stupid, cruel men who treat women and pigs alike. Colonel, don't you know what sort of regiment you've bred? They're all John Scarlett. Every one of them.
Mr. Drake, you will explain if you can.
Colonel, it is as I said. There is an officer in this regiment who attacks women with a sword. And I now believe that on these occasions, he dresses in that uniform. Captain Scarlett's uniform.
You are mistaken, sir. Why should anyone wish to impersonate John Scarlett?
If I might ask Major Wimborne that question, Colonel. He is waiting outside.
Very well. Call him.
Mr. Hutton?
If you please, sir.
And about bloody time, too. With respect, Colonel.
Sit there, please, sir.
Well?
Sir, 6 months ago, an attack was made upon Mrs. Bandonai. You took her to hospital.
What of it?
How did that come about?
I found her.
Hmm?
I found her.
Well, where?
Oh, what the devil does that matter?
In your bungalow. Is that where you found her?
What if I did?
How did she happen to be there, sir?
Oh, now, how the hell should I know?
Had you not invited her to spend the night, sir?
All right. I have. No crime in that.
No, sir. You found her, you said?
Yes. I'd gone out to inspect the guard. I was duty officer, as I am tonight.
And when you got back, you found that she had been attacked, and so you took her to the hospital?
Yes.
Where she almost died. As you know, Mrs. Scarlett has now been attacked in the same way.
I know that Mrs. Scarlett has been attacked, that's all. By Millington here.
In the same way, and not by Mr. Millington. That has been established.
Oh? I see. Who was it then?
I'm hoping, sir, that you can answer that question.
Why me?
You know Mrs. Scarlett very well.
Yes.
And you were a close friend of her husband.
I was.
We're looking for someone who has many of his qualities. A good soldier, a fine sportsman, a man who enjoys the company of women.
Yeah, that could be me.
Yes, sir.
What? Oh, for God's sake, you don't think I did it, do you?
Why not, sir?
Why not? Ah, if you want to know why not, you better examine your evidence, laddie.
Which evidence, sir?
When Marge, Mrs. Scarlett, was attacked, I was dancing with Mrs. Forster. Everyone saw me.
I don't believe you.
Ask him. Ask Fothergill. He took the depositions. It's all written down.
Mr. Fothergill? Yes, it's true, Mr. President. I saw Major Winborn myself. And both the doctor and Mrs. Forster have sworn it in their depositions.
Any more bright ideas, laddie?
Oh, I know. You're thinking, if it wasn't Winborn, who was it? Could it have been Major Roach?
He was some distance away, inspecting the guard.
That's right. I saw him running. Was it the doctor, then?
He was with Colonel Forster.
Yes, and I was with Mrs. Forster. So you're right back where you started, aren't you? We seem to have run out of suspects, laddie.
You know who it is, sir. If you don't help me, he'll attack again.
Then I must remember to stand with my back to the wall. Mustn't I?
Sir.
I can't help you, Mr. Drake. I have duties to attend to.
Yes. Thank you, Major.
Colonel.
I'm sorry, Colonel.
Sit down, please, Mr. Drake. Captain Harper, the charges against Mr. Millington having been withdrawn, I invite you to conclude your proceedings without delay.
Yes, Colonel. Gentlemen, as President of the Court, I instruct you to find Mr. Millington not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
I also find him not guilty. Rise, please, Mr. Millington. As you have been found innocent of the charges brought against you, you You're now free to return to your duties. Colonel?
Mr. Millington, you have been unjustly treated by this regiment. You yourself have behaved with some stupidity. I trust we may now see a new beginning.
Yes, Colonel.
Very well. I welcome you to the regiment.
Thank you, Colonel.
Gentlemen, this court is now dissolved.
Now, Millington, come over to my quarters. I've got a couple of sausages. Thank you. We can celebrate this, don't you?
I must thank you, Arthur.
You have nothing to thank me for.
I have a bourgeois principle to thank you for. Good night, Arthur.
Good night, Edward.
See that I have a full report of this first thing in the morning.
Yes, Colonel.
Thank you, Mr. Fothergill.
Colonel.
Sorry, Colonel.
No, Rupert, you have behaved as I should expect of you, with exemplary courage and fairness. You've done well.
Thank you, sir. I only wish we had done less well. Good night, Colonel.
Good night.
Colonel, I too take little pleasure in what I've done.
You did what needed to be done. I have this morning received your letter of resignation. Do you wish me to accept it or tear it up?
I should like you to accept it. I'm sorry, Colonel. I find that I cannot put the honor of the regiment above my own.
Your honor and the regiment's should be one, Mr. Drake. They must be.
Yes, I understand that, Colonel. That's why I must go.
Very well. I accept your resignation. With regret. Alistair.
I couldn't tell you, Ben. You would have been obliged to take official action. The regiment could never have survived the scandal. What we've hidden has been hidden too long.
I want the matter ended now.
Very well, leave it to me. It shall be handled in the traditional way, as a matter of honor.
A matter of honor.
It's not as you think, Ben.
Oh, yes. I am the regiment. What I have allowed to happen is what I am. It is well my time here is nearly done. You will not again speak to me of honor.
Get all those lamps out.
Yes, sir.
Quickly.
Is there anything further, sir?
Don't come back.
No, sir.
You've been very anxious to meet him, haven't you, Mr. Drake? Now you shall.
What?
He's out there now. When I turn down this lamp, he'll come in.
Why?
Because he always does. We talk together. He likes to have someone to talk to.
Sir, you can't.
You're very keen on telling us what we can and can't do. But you know nothing. Nothing. You think all this is about honor.
Isn't it?
It's about comradeship. Friendship. If you'd witnessed the mutilation of John Scarlett, to see a man, a friend, his sex ripped away, a man no longer.
Sir, the sword, the mess game. Why should Mrs. Bandonai and Mrs. Scarlett be singled out for attack in this manner?
They were unfaithful. In his mind, their infidelity to regimental heroes had made them pigs. And that's how we treat pigs in this regiment. Now, you will sit over there, Mr. Drake. In that chair, in the shadows. You may watch, but you will not intervene.
Good evening. Well, turn up the lamp, you silly bugger. I can't see what I'm doing. That's better.
You won't be needing that jacket tonight, John. You won't be going anywhere tonight.
Why not, old boy? Haven't let the side down again, have I?
Yes. Only I'm afraid I can't help you. This time.
The regiment must be rid of you.
What am I?
Forrester. Lionel. Look.
I saw him.
I know. You were possessed by him. As though there were two.
I am possessed by him. I am too. I've tried to... But when he takes over, I do know what I've done. It was me. Oh, God. It was me.
Lionel. Too much damage has been done. I can no longer protect you. You understand me?
I understand.
And I shall tell the Colonel that Captain Scarlett is dead.